It is the 5th of September 2023, and we have a great bunch here. This is UX Research Call number 25. We have e-currency holder here, or Andrew if you prefer. He's going to be sharing with us his process that he's been using in the Saving Satoshi project. And we have Christoph here, which is also great because he's been the one who's been working together. They've been working together to build this. And I'm just, yeah, really curious to learn from you guys and find out how it's been going. So, yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Andrew, Christoph, and anyone else. Feel free to talk at any point. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks, Mo, for inviting me to talk. I'm just going to talk through what the process that I set up for Saving Satoshi. Saving Satoshi is a web-based game that teaches people how to code on top of Bitcoin. And yeah, so for us, it's kind of like I decided to break it down into 3 steps. First creating a process, interviewing the user, and then sharing the results. So let's talk about like creating a process. Um, what I did was I created several user profiles. And this was important for us because we weren't exactly sure who our ideal target audience was. And it's something that we're still not super clear about. And so what I did was for the user profiles, there are 3 that I looked at. One was a beginner dev who took coding classes. The second one was a senior developer. Maybe they're not super familiar with Bitcoin. And the last one was a Bitcoin expert, someone who's done and coded on Bitcoin, maybe even submitted a pull request. And so then after creating my user profiles, I decided to interview them one by one for each from each category. And then the last part was breaking interviews into chunks of our platform. And so for us, it's really easy because it's a web-based game and we have chapters. We have chapters 1 through 10 that are slated. We've completed chapters 1 and 2. We're working on a third. And so for the interview, it's really easy because I'll hop out with one of them once a week, and we'll go through one chapter, and then I'll just record the whole process. And so, yeah. So the next is like just interviewing the user. It's helpful when you interview the user, like for a specific chapter, to have a hypothesis that you're trying to test. During the interview, try avoid leading the user with leading questions. It's also important to get their background in terms of like, what is it? What is their like educational backgrounds? What is their level of experience? How many years of coding experience have they had? Yeah, and that helps inform us in terms of like figuring out who exactly our target audience is. Like, are they familiar with Bitcoin? That's another one. Another aspect that I looked for is knowing what our team is struggling with and looking for it inside the interview and asking for that. And so, yeah, examples are kind of like, one example is like, yeah, like who exactly is our target audience? Another one is like, are our challenges too difficult, right? And so when they completed a challenge, just kind of following up and looking for specific things and asking them, hey, is this doable? Like, is this, yeah, was this like too difficult for you? Can it be harder? And one of the things that we discovered was when for chapter 2 for our challenge, we thought, oh, it might be too difficult. We weren't quite sure, but as we were doing the user interviews, I realized, oh, like it can actually be harder. Like even the beginner dev thought it could be harder, and he wanted it to be harder because he said, if as I go through the game, like I want to solve challenging problems, and so that was like pretty insightful. And like other examples of knowing what our team is struggling with and looking for are like specific features inside of the game that we had. So for example, there was like a copy paste button that we had. There's no direction. We weren't exactly sure if people would intuitively click on it to complete the challenge. And so that's another example of something specific that I was looking for during the interview. So yeah, it's all that to say is that like it's really helpful to understand what the team was trying to do with the product and validating those assumptions that we made in um, creating the product, so that during the user interview I can be very specific about things that we're looking for. um, Another thing to do while you're interviewing the user is watch how they interact with the UI, and ask them like why after they make their movement, so you can understand their thinking process and behavior. Also, you should try recording the interview. The platform that I've been using is just like Google, and I've been screen recording the sessions, and so that's been working out really great, because you're able to track their mouse movements and things like that. So it's been super helpful. And I left a link to an example of one of the interviews that I did. I think it's for the beginner user. And the last part here is just like sharing the results. Um, not everyone in the team is going to have 30 minutes to watch the interview, and so it's really helpful if you, as a PM or someone conducting the user interview, are able to summarize it for the team. So report back key takeaways, and what I like to do is I like to affirm assumptions that we've made. Because I think it just builds confidence in the team. And so just encouraging them, hey, like, remember when we did the copy paste button, people have been using that intuitively, and we made the right call. We made the right assumptions on that. The third step here is to create issues of actionable items so it doesn't go to waste. Now, this is a bit tricky because noticing it in one interview from one person, we have to be careful not to give it too much weight, too much importance to radically change our UI or the platform. But there's not like a specific process or criteria, but it's more of like a gut feeling, I would say. But just know like when one specific issue should be verified multiple times across multiple people, or multiple user interviews, and also knowing when there are immediate action items that need to be taken. An example of immediate action item that we had during the user interview was, there was when somebody was coding, there was a pretty poor error messaging that kind of confused the end user. And so that to me was pretty obvious. Hey, we needed to change this, or else other people are going to get confused. Things that needed to be validated multiple times across multiple user interviews was this one feature where someone's kind of like typing in characters inside of a UI, inside of a prompt, and it's hashing. It uses those letters to hash. Uh, and once you hit like 3 zeros in the hash, then you complete the challenge. Now, this can take a long time because you are really hashing. You're doing like real hashing, SHA-256 hashing, and so there's no like, we don't time it out after a certain number of attempts. So what we did was, to help the user and not feel like they get stuck, we fade in a little prompt that says "need a hint," and if they click that or hover their mouse over it, it gives them the solution that will automatically trigger a hash with 3 zeros in the front. But what one thing that I was looking for was, where are their eyes looking at when they're hashing? Is it when they're typing? Is it the area where they're typing in the letters, or is it the area where the hash is being produced? We initially put it in the area where people were typing, and so I noticed this. I noticed that with one of the user interviews, that their eyes were actually looking at the hash output rather than inputting the letters, and so I just made a note of that. I interviewed another person, and he did the same thing. Instead of his eyes looking at where he was typing the letters, his eyes were looking at the hash output. And then I validated it a third time with another user. And so by that point, um, we realized, oh, it's probably this is a consistent behavior where people, their eyes are not looking at where they're typing, but they're looking at what the hash output is. And so rather than surfacing the fade in text need a hint where people were typing, we put it we created an issue to put it where the hash output was, and so it's more easily readable or viewable by the end user. So Yeah, that's kind of like just it pretty much like in terms of like our overview process of our user research methodology. It's really light, it's very quick, it's not super extensive. The biggest thing I would say after you do all this is to make sure that things are easily identifiable or findable and searchable. And so that's just a matter of organization inside your Google files where you keep the recordings and the notes that you took as you go through the interview. But but yeah, that's pretty much it. Uh, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thanks for obviously I'm on the receiving end of this one, and so I really appreciate the format that it's every week you found one person and you're able to kind of independently do this thing where you just kind of it's like the findings are kind of slowly being trickled into everyone's brains, and even you know if you do that several weeks at a time, and if you do that over time, you just start thinking a little bit differently. You stop thinking a little about so much about some design detail or some code detail. You really think about the user features, and I think the whole team gets a good feeling for the experience out of this. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I think that's a big struggle for a lot of projects, is how did you find those specific people?
Yeah, they're just my friends.
Just have a lot of friends, I guess.
Yeah, they're just friends that have. I'm a really good networker, and so yeah, I just reached out to people who fit the criteria of new coder, somewhat familiar with Bitcoin, senior engineer, not super familiar with Bitcoin, and also a Bitcoin expert. But yeah, I mean, other ways that you can do is just like ask on Twitter. Look at your Bitcoin meetups. When you find someone to interview, like ask them for referrals. Um, yeah, and then yeah, asking the team too if they have any recommendations of people for to be interviewed. But at that point, it's helpful to tell them, your team, like what specifically you're looking for and what the process is, right? Like, are you looking for a new dev? Are you looking for a Bitcoin expert? And just being explicit about your user profiles so that they are inviting and recommending the right person to be interviewed is important.
Very cool. And of course, with this seems like it's a good fit because it is meant for kind of people new to Bitcoin, already in Bitcoin, which you being involved so closely, it kind of matches your circles anyway. So it's much harder if, let's say, you want to research people that are around the world, somewhere else in the world that you have nothing in common with.
Yeah, and I would say there's even value in people who fit outside like what you think the product should be. So ours is a web-based game that teaches people how to develop on Bitcoin, right? But I intentionally wanted to interview a Bitcoin expert, but that has been valuable for, I think, us in a different way. Rather than validating, oh, was this product useful for you? It was more like we actually got his feedback on coding challenges, and how it should be structured and what specifically we should be looking for. And so his input actually, I felt like helped us like with the challenge a little bit more. So I don't think it's a terrible idea to interview people outside of your target audience, because there could be interesting insights that they provide.
Yep, that's a good one.
And Andrew, you had a question about the results being searchable, and making sure that everything is searchable. So I was just curious how you're doing that and keeping it in one place. Are you using a particular tool or Notion or?
Yeah, right now, what I do is I don't have the system set up explicitly. Like I just have a Google Drive, and then I have folders where it's clearly labeled. Chapter one here. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Uh, let's see.
And while you're searching for that, Emil and Tudun, you're also here on this call. You're more than welcome to ask questions as well. So feel free to just jump in at any point.
So I had a question. So for just background, I'm a developer, so I'm new to this, so it might be something simple, but yeah. Let's say you have multiple hypotheses you want to test for the interview. Like, how would you prioritize them? Like, for like the hint example which you gave, like, how did you choose that was what I should test out instead of something else? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. So mine was the way that I tested assumptions were feature based, and as the feature came up through our chapters, as people were going through the chapters, like I just asked them and tested that. I think your question is relevant to like what is like our overall hypothesis for this product. And so what I would say is like, if you have multiple hypotheses for the specific product that you want to test and validate, like just choose one, like use your gut feeling on like what the most likely hypothesis is, and then use that as like a baseline. And then when you start interviewing other people, you can start testing other hypotheses against the one that you used as a baseline.
Oh, okay, makes sense. So between interviews, try changing them so that you get a holistic picture.
Yeah. So let's say like you have one hypothesis. Man, this is hard to talk about abstractly, but like, okay. So I have three user profiles: new beginner, senior dev, Bitcoin expert. Like those are my user profiles. And let's say I have hypothesis A, B, and C that I want to test. What I would do is, let's say I have a gut feeling that hypothesis A is that this is the one that I really want to test across all user profiles. So I would do hypothesis A across all three user profiles. And then I would find a whole set of other people and test hypothesis B. And then I would compare the first round of hypothesis with the second round of hypothesis, and then just see and compare those two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for the detail.
Yeah. So this is kind of how I bucketed. Thanks, Turan. Yeah, this is just how I'm organizing it for now. I think if we have like tons of users or user interviews, I might have to think about it differently. But literally, I'm just doing like I'm doing like the user profile, which is a beginner dev. Um, yeah, new to Bitcoin. We have a senior dev, new to Bitcoin, and experienced Bitcoin dev. And inside of these user profiles, I'm just keeping track of the user interviews that we've done, which is chapter 1 and chapter 2. Yeah. And every time I do an interview, I have a Google Notes of Google Sheet of, a Google Doc of the notes that I took during the interview, and then a PowerPoint presentation that I share with the team, just highlighting the key points and takeaways. And this is the video that they can watch that I've uploaded to Google Drive, although I'm going to be switching to uploading them onto YouTube so that we don't eat up a ton of drive space. Yeah. Cool.
So this is a really random question. I was just thinking, do you think it's ever worth interviewing someone on the team? So they have to pretend to be new to this, and they have to use it and talk about what they actually do. It's kind of forcing someone into the user role. I mean, there obviously will be bias. They will know things, right? But I don't know. Just because I mean, I feel like it always helps. Like there's I've noticed that with some designers, they have a very good ability to just forget everything they know about the world and just use something with a blank mind. And they just notice a lot of things. They can kind of separate, or what do you call that? Yeah, just be in that clean slate a little bit. I don't know if you can. I guess if you can't find anyone to interview, you can interview people in the team as a last resort.
I mean, yeah, like with emergent tech or like 0 to 1 products, you are probably building it for yourself, kind of. So it's good for you to kind of test it yourself. Um, I think for our team, we kind of do that through our QA processes in our cycles. Um, but yeah, I definitely think that it could be helpful to, if someone is able to just remove complete bias when they go through the chapters, I definitely think that would be useful to interview them.
It's a good point that Christoph brought up, because I actually had another idea as well that I got when I was on my work trip. Um, one of the product managers I met actually suggested having people in the team also giving them the opportunity to interview users as well, and pretty much just do what you're doing, so that it just gives a little bit of a hands-on view in terms of what the user experience is. And it's always different when someone else interviews. Um, because we have our own sort of style that we interview, but then if you hand it over, and yeah, that the person that I spoke to said that they just let other members of the team also interview, and also just it's kind of like everyone takes ownership for that process, if they have time, if they'd like to do it, of course.
Mo, I think when you did your talk at BTC Prague, there was someone in the audience who also said a similar thing. It was about how do you convey these results effectively to people? And she said, well, I don't. I just take them along. They can see it for themselves.
Exactly. Which is great, which is what we did with Bitcoin Core, when we did the live guerrilla testing. I think it was really good because we had everyone on the call and we had two people testing. So I feel like that's a really very open, transparent way of getting everyone involved. So, yeah.
Andrew, I know you only have 5 minutes left or so. How much work was this whole thing for you? Do you feel like it's a sustainable thing that you can do across months and months of a project, or do you feel like this is something that you do when you're close to like doing initial discovery, or when you're close to launch, or what are your thoughts on that? Because you also have other stuff to do, right? Project management, organizing calls, checking in with people, and all that.
Yeah, good question. I think like it's definitely sustainable. It's just a 30-minute call where you record it, and then maybe 30 minutes to just review, reflect, and pull out key takeaways to create the PowerPoint. So it's really not too much. It's like hours worth of work total, just once a week, because you're only interviewing one person per week. So totally doable, I would say. I would in terms of like when to do it, I think it's really tough to do it in the beginning of creating a product, just because you're still, I think the team is still trying to figure out like what a hypothesis in general, and it's just like maybe too early to be inviting users to test it out and to figure it out. But yeah, Jonas was pretty smart about like directing us to do the user interview at this moment in time. I had like maybe thought about trying to do it earlier, but he said like let's push it off, and I think it was the right move to do it later, because we have more stuff to test, and it's easier to build a cadence now of of weekly interviews, because we have two chapters instead of just like one. So yeah. But yeah, Mo, to your question of like encouraging other people on the team to do it, I think that's an awesome idea. I kind of work around it by like doing the recording, and so that people can watch the recording. But again, like, yeah, they have to want to watch the 30-minute video, right? But it creates so much empathy for members on the team to actually see a user use a product. And like Christoph was saying, like it changes, I think, the vibe and like the focus of development if they see a user use the product. Yeah.
Well, I, for one, have really enjoyed this. Thank you, Andrew, very much for your time and your willingness to come on and share your process with us. And also for Christoph, because he's the other side of of the story and how all of this kind of fits together.
Andrew, when you were saying earlier that some feedback was that the challenges were too easy, this is probably because I, as a designer, designed a bunch of this stuff. And for anything that's a little bit more difficult, I just fail, like some of these technical coding stuff.
Maybe that should be another user profile that we test, a designer.
Yeah, and they're okay. It's okay when they fail at things. If they can do the task, it's too easy. So you expect every interview to be miserable.
Well, guys, Andrew has another call straight after this, and I'd like to, give him a breather in between his calls. He has 3 minutes. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us and for creating the presentation as well. Really, really appreciate it. And I think it's definitely something that we can be doing in other open source projects, and I'm definitely going to try it out on Bitcoin Core.
Oh, thanks, Mo, for inviting me.
Thank you very much for being here. If anyone else would like to share anything, feel free as well.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thanks, Mo, for organizing this call.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The recording.
Thanks for coming out, man. Appreciate you.
See ya.
Bye.